He's finished helping the governor. Now we've got him on Carolina People. Meet the president of Francis Marion University, coming up next. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Smith Center at Francis Marion University, and we're visiting with its president, Dr. Fred Carter. Good morning, Dr. Carter.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks so much for being with us this morning. Do you mind if do you want us to call you Dr. Carter, or is Fred okay?
Fred, please. Delighted to have you here.
This is magnificent. Enjoyed so much coming in early this morning to see the Smith Center, the University Center is hopping.
Things are a little busy today here.
They really are, absolutely. Actually, we were here a couple of months ago focused on the PD area Heart Walk and had an amazing group, 10 folks in to celebrate what I'm sure was a magnificent walk. And actually, just yesterday, we had a woman in, Rhonda Weatherford, who is chairing the
juvenile diabetes.
Exactly. Truly committed, and another big opportunity for Francis Marion.
Yeah, we're delighted that so many of the philanthropic organizations in the area ask us to play host to some of their events. It's an important role for a state university.
Yes, and y'all are in such a central area, so easy to find. It makes a big, big difference.
Thanks.
Dr. Carter, about yourself, were you originally from the PD?
No, I grew up in Florida and got out of the service in the mid-'70s and roughly lived about 5 years in Columbia, 10 years in Charleston, 10 years in Columbia, and now we've lived in the PD about 5 years. So about the only part of South Carolina we haven't lived is the upstate.
Is the upstate. So. That's exactly right. Or the Strand yet.
Or the Strand.
The PD's pretty dang close to the Strand, and of course the Low Country as well. That's exciting. And of course that experience of living in those three parts of the state have given you, I guess, a pretty great appreciation for the state.
I think so. I think, as you know, Greg, the cultures are somewhat different across those three regions. And as a result of that, the politics are markedly different. So it has provided an interesting range of experiences.
When you were down in Charleston, I think I saw you were the chairman of the political science department of the College of Charleston.
I was on the faculty at the College of Charleston for a number of years and chaired the political science department.
And you'd gotten your Ph.D. in
I'm in political science, specifically in public administration.
Okay, great. When someone thinks of public administration, for a viewer, let's say on the Strand or in southeastern North Carolina who may not understand exactly what that means, is that just state government or is that
No, it's actually the administration of the public sector, be it federal, state, local, or nonprofit.
Okay.
So,
how important. Do you ever focus on South Carolina politics?
I guess maybe the last 20 years, I've developed probably an increasing specialization in South Carolina politics and government, both scholarly and applied interests.
I think I saw one of your books, and I hate to even point that out because it's always strange to point out an author of multiple books, but was related to the electoral process, maybe an early one.
Right. One of the first ones, we tried to look at the impact of home rule in South Carolina. And of course, much of that occurred during the 1970s, the constitutional referendum that passed, and then the adoption of various county governance forms by various counties, and looking at the electoral impact of that. Greg, that was so long ago.
Don't get into it, yeah.
And it was so turgid that I almost become bored talking about it. I was talking to a young faculty member the other day here who was talking about how self-conscious he was by going back and reading the prose in his early work, and I am too. You look at that early work, and everything that you looked at had that sense of self-importance attached to it. Over time, I think you come to understand that I wish I'd looked at things of some broader interest to people, but that's neither here nor there.
Speaking of that, it's kind of funny. If you're a really popular political science professor, a psychology professor, otherwise on campus, the folks in that department may know it and may love you, and the students may think he or she's a superstar. But if you're the university president, there's not a place on campus that someone doesn't know you, Dr. Carter.
Well,
Fred, What's that like?
Well, first of all, being a university president is the best job in the world.
Oh, yeah.
I've not found anything that's comparable to this, simply because you have the opportunity to work with so many intellectually gifted people on the
Right.
faculty.
Right.
You have the opportunity to work with so many students that are just, really struggling to try to better themselves and to acquire an education. And it's the nice thing about this job, and by the way, the nice thing about being a faculty member in general, is that you can really see your accomplishments come to life. I mean, you can watch a student in a class during the course of the 15 or 16 weeks master a subject. I mean, how many people really work in a line of work in which they can sit back and really see what they're accomplishing? In this business, you can see what you're accomplishing, and consequently, you can take great delight in it. So, good job, great line of work.
Like training up a child.
That's absolutely correct. I occasionally I go to these conferences and I listen to some of my colleagues talk about how difficult it is being a university president, how stressful. Hey, let me tell you, it's the best job in society.
Listen to that.
And by the way, I don't see many of these guys complaining about the stress of these kinds of jobs, looking to get out of them quickly, but
Right.
That's neither here nor there.
Well, there have been so many university presidents or college presidents. We had Dr. Luns Richardson with us from Morris College. Actually aired a couple of weeks ago, and even were with us again at the Florence Little Theater, and then another time up at Coker College. We were visiting. It was so exciting hearing him talk about his, I think it was 29, almost 3-decade tenure there at Morris College. The excitement, as you say, and Dr. Dawson was with us a couple of months back. We've been so excited to see that extension of a love of a college campus.
Wonderful way of life. Wonderful way of life.
When you think about being in the classroom and seeing the students change or seeing them master a subject, have you been able to keep in touch with, let's say, with some of your students, your first classroom days back in Charleston 20-some years ago?
Yeah, I have. I guess, and of course, any faculty member will tell you this. The difficulty is running into somebody at a grocery store in Columbia who will come up to you and say, "Dr. Carter, do you remember me?" And of course, it's so, particularly when you look at students that you may have had 15 or 20 years ago, and it's so difficult to recount those. But yeah, I remember many of my students, and I guess, I've certainly, I think back, and some of this probably has to do with where I've been and what I've been privileged to do, but I've had some students over the years I've been terrifically pleased in their own accomplishments and developments. Robert Stewart, the chief of SLED, was both my undergraduate and graduate students. And former Governor Jim Hodges was one of my undergraduate students.
Is that right?
Yeah, so
wow.
It's, as you kind of go through the cycle, you come to understand that particularly in an area like political science and public administration, so many of these young men and women go on to do things.
Oh yeah.
In local, state, and federal politics.
Oh yeah.
And of course, as you might imagine, it's extraordinarily gratifying.
Oh yeah.
To see the successes of somebody like Robert Stewart, who, quite candidly, is one of the finest public servants we have in this state.
And guys like Jim Hodges, that's exciting.
That's right.
We had a professor, a Duke Law School professor, with us. Golly, maybe in early October, who's taught at Duke Law School since 1950.
Yeah.
Who's actually outlived many of his own students. I mean, many of the students came through in that class in 1950. And, of course, he's still teaching there criminal law and national security law, and a fascinating guy. The college campus was without you on a full-time basis for about a year. Excuse me, the university campus here at Francis Marion.
Sure.
You were commuting back and forth to Columbia. For viewers, let's say, on the Strand or in southeastern North Carolina who may not have heard of the sabbatical that Dr. Carter took from Francis Marion to take on the chief of staff's position under Governor Sanford. Can you talk about that for a minute? Just what that was like, what the extension of the offer to do that, and then about the board?
Greg, I've told this story to different people over time. I didn't know Governor Sanford very well. I certainly didn't know him very well prior to his election. He had, during the campaign, he'd stopped by Francis Marion one time. We had lunch together here. I listened to some of his ideas, and I kind of bit of a joke between the two of us. I told him, I said, well, Congressman, yeah, I certainly appreciate some of your ideas, but I just think there's little likelihood that you'll be elected in what I think it will be a very crowded primary. And quite honestly, even if you win that, I think it's remote that you'll be able to unseat an incumbent governor like Governor Hochul.
And my former student, yeah.
That's right. And of course he laughs at it, and he said, "Well, we'll see." And the next time I had a direct conversation with him was about 2 weeks after the 2 weeks after the election. It was a Friday evening. I was driving onto Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. I was doing a seminar on national security affairs that weekend up there. And I drove onto the base. My cell phone rang, and it was the governor-elect. And he led with a question. Well, tell me what kind of characteristics and traits you think I ought to be looking for in a chief of staff. So we talked kind of through that, and then ultimately at the end of the conversation, he said, "Well, have you given any thought to like maybe coming and thinking about being a chief of staff? I mean, what would it take to give up your job at Francis Marion?" And of course, as you might imagine from our previous conversation here this morning, I have no intention of giving up this job at Francis Marion unless my faculty or my board throw me out. But we were able to talk about and work out a year's sabbatical, which gave me the opportunity to work with the governor in establishing his administration initially, and also allowed me to still be involved with issues at the university.
Oh, yeah.
And so we were, at least for the past year, we were able to juggle those two concerns.
And how so important for your students to recognize the practical side. Of course,
Sure.
your faculty is magnificent and has been recognized as such
Terrific faculty.
all
Best
over the
faculty in the
place.
state,
As
no
we think
question.
about that same law school professor from Duke, the practical side of this guy is he's also a practicing attorney. He was a federal judge for a number of years. And students would come to him and say, "We need a recommendation from you," not because they didn't enjoy their other faculty, but because this is someone who was out and doing exactly what they were about to be stepping out to do. So the excitement, I'm sure, for your students as well as the other faculty, to have you back, but to be able to talk to you about what it's like out there.
Sure. Well, Greg, I have an extraordinarily good provost here, Richard Chapman, who's just one of the finest administrators I know, who kept things running day to day. The board was very supportive in working out that arrangement, and so it just it worked out well. Fortunately, my vehicle cooperated during some 35,000 miles that we traveled together last year.
Right.
And I never broke down. The vehicle never needed repair during the course of the year, although I did run out of gas one time.
Oh, is that, you're kidding?
Yes, but that on my way back to an event. But I became a little better planner as a result of that.
Yes, absolutely. And your cell phone worked, obviously.
And my cell phone
That's
worked,
exactly
that's
right.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Although I learned a curious little lesson about that. You can call people on the cell phone between 7:30 and 9 at night when you're coming back, but it's not such a good idea to call people on the cell phone between 5:30 and 7:15 in the morning on your way in.
And that was exciting seeing that. I think there was a little Knight Ridder story about that, 4:45 a.m., getting up, grabbing the paper, maybe some coffee, getting on the road for the 90-minute trip to Columbia, and then back at night oftentimes to try to get home early enough to read your son, I think now a 7-year-old son, a bedtime story, which was kind of an exciting piece. What's that like?
Yeah, it was. Well, I have two sons. I have my older son now is 26. My younger son's 7. So I can pace the two sons a couple of decades apart. I think, as with a lot of older parents who had for perhaps one family and then subsequently has another one, I resolved with the second child that I wasn't going to miss all the things I missed with my first child. And so I guess one of the things that became important, finally my wife and I sat down and discussed this year in Columbia. This also becomes the year in which my son graduates from preschool and enters the first grade. this is just too important part of his life for me to not be a part of completely.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried to structure it best we could to provide at least some time for me to have with Luke on a daily basis. And of course, a lot of folks continued to chide me. You need to stay in Columbia during the week and simply come home on weekends.
yeah.
But that wasn't a part of the deal.
Right.
So, it's far easier for me to come back nightly and at least have that part of my life vibrant.
Now, I saw there was a little time, maybe a 2-week stretch, where you may have had to stay in Columbia, but maybe not. I'd be interested to know that. I think I saw in a similar piece that 10 o'clock conference calls while the governor was in
Sure,
Alabama or
sure.
somewhere. Were you up there at that little stretch?
When the governor was in Alabama and when the governor was abroad on on the economic development trip to the Pacific Rim,
Right.
I did stay in Columbia longer, during those 2-week structured period,
Mm-hmm.
but for a number of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One is to be there and not be on the road a lot with the governor gone, but more compellingly because the governor and I spoke daily
Right.
when he was gone, and the governor was during both those periods very actively involved in the day-to-day administration of state government. I mean, so much of this is tied to the nature of Mark Sanford, for whom I have enormous respect.
Mm-hmm.
And but he's the type of individual that just likes to stay actively involved, even when he's on economic development trip to the Far East.
Right.
Just likes to know what's going
Oh, yeah.
on day to day.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Have you all ever laughed a little bit about the old lunch you had here at
We have.
Francis Marion?
Yeah, he's one of the things that's so redeeming about the governor is that he's an individual who has an enormous sense of humor,
Right.
loves to laugh at himself, and works hard never to take himself too seriously, and he's a very very easy person to interact with. I think you and I were talking a little earlier about the one thing you've got to guard against sometimes is you'll get so caught up in a conversation with him, an energetic conversation. Sometimes it's so easy to forget he's the governor.
Yeah.
And I can remember exchanges before we'd be involved in some vehement, exchange or something. I'd look at him and say, "Where the hell did you come up with that?" And then it dawns on me, "Oh, wait, I didn't." But he actually delights in
Yeah.
those types of processes, and he's a very informal man who quite honestly not only enjoys that type of interaction with the staff, he demands that type of interaction with the staff.
Mm-hmm. Which is vital. He may be
Sure.
the only one out of the 50 folks in that same position throughout the country that's that way. But it's so important to remember these are all folks who do the same things we do on a regular. They use the
Sure,
bathroom.
sure.
I mean that try to bring it down, and it's that attitude that we heard from faculty and others talking about Fred Carter. BMOC, yes. Big man on campus, yes, but down to earth. And
Was
that's
that a
it.
shot at my weight? Was that a shot? Was that a shot the weight I gained in
I
Columbia
think,
this past year?
oh my God, that's right. Well, I think Florence Chambers doing a new
Wait.
weight thing
We
that
are.
we're going to
That's
talk to
absolutely
Tom
correct.
Marshall about tomorrow.
Yeah.
But it's great to know that there's that aspect of a governor, and that's a big deal in South
Sure.
Carolina.
Sure it is. And here's a governor that works constantly, Greg, to make himself available to people, make himself accessible, and to do it in a way that's not the least intimidating.
Mhm. When he was the congressman serving the 1st District of South Carolina, the Charleston or the Horry, Georgetown, Charleston, that area, I think he was frequently seen at Walmarts greeting folks.
Still does.
Loves the
Yeah.
Walmarts, absolutely. It's the largest employer in South Carolina, so it's probably good to be seen. I mean, it's good to be around there, to be out there. A heck of a lot of folks go to those locations.
He, as we're structuring this administration, one of the things he decides he wants to do is monthly he wants to have an open door after 4.
Yeah.
He wants to throw open the doors of the State House, the governor's office, and invite the people of South Carolina in, and do it essentially in 5 to 7 minute appointment structures.
Right.
So anybody who has a problem has the opportunity to go in and sit down with the governor. And of course, those of us that supposedly have all this experience and you just kind of groan at this, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But I just tell you, one of the things I came probably to enjoy the most in that administration was to look at the group of people that would go in and meet with and talk to the governor.
Mm-hmm.
And with what to their way of thinking were the most impossible, insurmountable problems.
Mm-hmm.
And to walk out of there with, you know, with an enormous smile on their face. Not that he could always solve their problems, although he made an effort to, but that they had had the opportunity to sit down and speak with the most powerful person in the state from whom they had undivided attention. And, you know, it's even the more cynical of us about political matters would watch that process and come away and appreciate that, you know, this is the way government really ought to work.
Well, now, are you sure he didn't pick that idea up from you, Fred?
No,
Isn't this Fred Carter, the guy who's got an open-door policy on campus?
And
I mean, that's,
you know,
you've got 4,200 students here. I mean, these folks, giving them an open-door policy is a big deal.
I've always enjoyed that. I've enjoyed the informal interaction I have with folks, my faculty, staff, students. But I got to tell you, Mark Sanford was born that way.
Wow.
I mean, he has an intuitive sense about how to reach out and cultivate people, and it's you know, it's rewarding to watch that. Now, of course, I appreciate that approach too.
Yeah.
I especially appreciate the agreement that we had early on that neither one of us would ever have to wear a tie to the office unless it was absolutely obligatory, given the nature of appointments or the like.
Right.
So, you know, I got to work for a governor and not have to wear a tie very much.
That's hilarious. That is fabulous, and it passed on to today, which is great.
Well,
I see you got not too many ties have Francis Marion on them or Francis Marion University on, so I'm glad you're wearing that. That's perfect.
and see, Greg, I'm actually wearing this not because I didn't want to wear a tie, but because it's the best way to promote Francis Marion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I support that, and
Okay.
we all do at Carolina People, very definitely. Real quick, that
Sure.
aspect of what makes Fred Carter tick. Yeah, I mean, when you think through as you go back in your youth, for instance, think about folks in your life, inspirations early on. Were there any inspirations in your youth?
Yeah, I certainly had, you know, first generation college student. My parents didn't have the opportunity to acquire much of an education, but they had deep appreciation for education. I had a couple of terrific professors at the University of Central Florida that I think were extraordinarily formative in the way that I came to think and develop. And I guess when it comes to South Carolina government, there were probably three people that at least kind of helped me along so much. Harry Lightsey, the former president of the College of Charleston, kind of made it possible for me to go work for Carroll Campbell for a number of years.
And he never got you back.
But I got to remain tenured there,
Right.
and over the years he was an incredible source of advice. Dr. Lightsey is just a national treasure. I mean, and particularly for the state of South Carolina, such a wonderful man. Of course, Carroll Campbell. God, what a presence as a governor. I just, so much of what I came to understand about leadership and trying to better understand and shape policy. I came as a result of working with Carroll Campbell. And lastly, the chairman of Senate Finance, for whom I had the opportunity to work as director of the Budget Control for a number of years, Senator John Drummond. I don't know, Greg, how well you know Senator Drummond, but World War II veteran, fighter pilot who shot down a POW, who's just, again, an incredibly remarkable man. But this state has a lot of truly seminal people that occasionally, if folks like me will shut their mouth and talk less and listen more, we come to understand how powerful those guys are in terms of being able to teach us all lessons.
So good to have those inspirations.
No question.
Early on or late in life. And now a 7-year-old son.
Yeah, well, if there's something truly I've learned as a result of my youngest son, Luke, it's the fact that I learned far more from him than I could ever possibly teach him. So it's kind of delightful at this point to be able to sit back and learn again the lessons of what it takes to be a responsible parent.
And your 26-year-old must be pumped about that as well.
He is.
Yeah.
He's the quintessential older brother who just absolutely delights in our youngest addition to the family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We got a couple of minutes, and we think of that aspect of being on campus, back on campus, full time now. Are there yearnings to get to Columbia at all?
No. I still have occasion daily or every other day to talk to my friends in the governor's office about thus and such, and so I still get to dabble a little bit. But let me tell you something. This again, being back here with my faculty and staff. I mean, these are terrific people, and I so enjoy this line of work.
Who have they found to follow in your footsteps there?
I think right now the responsibilities of chief of staff are split between Henry White, who's the governor's legal counsel, and I might point out one of my former students,
another one, yeah,
and Tom Davis, who is an attorney from Beaufort and is handling some of the legislative responsibility. Two terrific individuals. And certainly when it comes to the day-to-day operation of that office, I think far more adept than their predecessor.
It's names like Carol Campbell, John Drummond, Harry Lightsey. It's names like Luke Carter, inspirations at life, wherever they come in, college professors, parents, the inspiration to really provide that momentum to keep going. And it seems like Mark Sanford that have really helped change this guy to continue that open door policy for his students, the author of 4 books, the father of 2 boys, a devoted husband, and a great college professor. Dr. Fred Carter, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Thanks for being here.
Absolutely, and thanks for hosting us. Stay tuned to more Carolina People coming up next. We want to thank Dr. Fred Carter and all the staff and faculty here at Francis Marion University, as well as the Board of Trustees for allowing him to keep this dream job, for making today's Carolina People so special.